All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on SERDP's FY 2027 funding opportunities. My name is Laura Mack, and I will be your moderator today. So we'll get started in just a moment, but while we're waiting for more folks to join us, I'd like to cover a few quick logistics. Today's broadcast is listen only, but we have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, and you can submit questions at any time throughout the presentation using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please remember that we are not able to address questions about specific proposal ideas or individual technologies during this webinar. We'll prioritize questions that are broadly applicable to all potential submitters. Both the audio and the slides from today will be archived on our solicitation webpage if you'd like to refer back to them later. And we will be dropping a link to that in the chat for easy access. So I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. We have Dr. Andrea Leeson, the Executive Director of SERDP, Dr. Ramona Irie, the Environmental Restoration Program Manager, Dr. John Lascala, the Weapons Systems and Platforms Program Manager, and Kevin Hires, the Resource Conservation and Resilience Program Manager. Before I turn it over to Andrea, just a quick reminder that you can submit questions at any point using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And with that, I will hand it over to Andrea. Sorry,
No worries. Thanks so much, Laura. And thank you to everyone for joining us on our webinar today. We're looking forward to going over the solicitation itself, as well as answering questions from you at the end. Before we get into a summary of the solicitation and the topic areas, I did want to give a little overview about who we are. We are the Strategic Environmental Research and Development Program, and I'm including as well ESTCP, which is the Environmental Security Technology Certification Program. These are companion programs, and they are really integrally involved with each other, although today the solicitation we're focusing on is only on SERDP. So SERDP is our really traditional R&D program, and what we're looking at is developing and incubating these emerging technologies that will directly address some of DoD's strategic objectives that are related to the military installations and the testing and training lands. We work in partnership with the military services, the DOE and EPA, and we provide support across the industry, federal agencies, universities, and other research institutions in terms of this early stage research and development. With ESTCP, this program was developed roughly about 5 years after SERDP was established, which was well over 30 years ago, and it was intended to bridge what is commonly called the Valley of Death in terms of being able to take technologies that were developed under our R&D programs and bring them up into a level where they're operating at close to a commercial or full-scale use, really more at a pilot scale, so that we can really look at the proof of concept of the technology at the field scale. When we get a technology or really a knowledge base up to the ESTCP level, we're working very closely with individual installations at this time across the military services so that we get enough data that we can reduce the risks associated with any technical cost execution of those technologies at the commercial scale. And ultimately, this reduces the barriers to broader adoption of the technologies. The work we do under SERDP directly impacts the military installations and the mission of the DoD. We are working to enhance military readiness, safeguard the military lands, whether the testing and training lands or the other lands associated with the installations. We are looking at driving the cost savings for various activities that occur on the military installations, as well as capturing time savings. And so that will vary with the type of technology we're looking at. SERDP is organized across 4 different program areas, and you'll be seeing the program manager from each of these program areas today, except for munitions response. Today, this year, munitions response does not have a statement of need under SERDP, but We have environmental restoration, which is traditionally looking at dealing with chemicals of concern that are impacting DoD installations. And in particular, for the last several years, we've looked at PFAS in particular and mitigating the impact and the cleanup costs associated with PFAS. Munitions response deals with accelerating cost-effective detection, classification, and recovery of unexploded ordnance, or UXO, across active installations and formerly used defense sites. We have a program area on resource conservation, which is developing tools and methodologies, technologies to protect the 28 million acres plus of natural infrastructure for the testing and training operations. And they do this through mitigating wildfire issues, conserving endangered species, and containing invasive species threats. And then finally, we have the weapons systems and platforms program area. And under this area, what we're looking to do is secure access to these critical systems and platforms that are needed by the DoD and protect DoD personnel by removing hazardous chemicals or processes, for example, from paints, coatings, munitions, and equipment. So let me get a little bit more into the solicitation. So first of all, who do we fund? We are able to fund most entities. We fund DoD as well as other federal organizations. And as you'll see when we go along, there is a separate call for federal organizations. And then we fund the private sector, which would include, of course, universities, industry, and any other private sector organizations would fall under that grouping. With our SERDP solicitations, we generally release multiple statements of need each year, and you'll see that towards the end when we cover each of the statements of need. We will typically have multiple awards per statement of need. We do not set any kind of limit or determine that in advance. The number of awards per statement of need is really based on primarily technical quality as well as budget limitations. And then we fund multi-year proposals as well as limited scope proposals. Limited scope proposals are ones that are really more of a proof of concept. They're about 1 year in terms of the period of performance and under $350,000 for that effort. So this graph shows our proposal selection process. It's really a two-phase process, and let me walk through this briefly. It roughly is a 1 year cycle. We start developing statements of need over the summer, and then we develop these statements of need into two separate solicitations. One for the private sector, which we call the BAA. One is for the federal call for proposals. That is generally released in November. I did want to mention, we released our annual solicitation for FY27 in two parts this time. So part of it came out in November, and that is for the statements of need that are under the environmental restoration and the resource conservation program area. And then you would have seen another, like part 2 of our solicitation came out yesterday, which has the statements of need for the weapons systems and platforms program area. The instructions for both are the same in terms of the content, but the call dates for when you need to submit the pre-proposal are different. So please look at the specific submittal dates that are required for the statement of need that you're applying to. We then release that with pre-proposals due roughly in January. The WP pre-proposals will be due in February, but we have a slide on that later. Pre-proposals are a 5-page, essentially mini proposal that we use to just gauge the idea initially. We'd like to reduce the amount of work that investigators initially put in so that we can confirm that the idea is something that we're interested in before the investigator has to go to the full work of a full proposal. So the pre-proposal is limited to 5 pages. A formal cost proposal is not required, so it's much less time to pull that together. We will review those within about 3 to 4 weeks after receipt, and then send out a request for full proposal for a select number of investigators. Those generally are due in March, but we'll go over the due dates in a minute. Every full proposal that comes in does go to peer review. The peer review process is similar to a peer review process that's used, for example, with submitting journal articles. It goes out to subject matter experts for that particular topic. Those peer review comments are received. It goes to the SERDP Technical Committee for review. The technical committee is made up of representatives from the military services as well as DOE, EPA, and other relevant agencies. Technical committee makes a recommendation to the program office. Selections occur in July and notifications go out roughly in July. And then finally in September to November, there is final approval by the technical review board. So all in all, that's a several month process. Solicitation dates then are shown here. And as I said, there are 2 different dates that you'll need to look at depending on the statements of need. Pre-proposals for the ER and the RC areas are due January 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, submitted in our online system in SEMS. These are hard deadlines. If you submit after that time on January 13th, we won't be able to accept the pre-proposal. The WP pre-proposals will be due on February 5th at 2 p.m. Full proposal requests will go out in February, and then the ER and RC full proposals will be due March 19th at 2 p.m. WP will be due April 2nd at 2 p.m. And then selection notifications generally go out in July or early August with the technical review board presentation later that year. And then project initiation will be in generally spring 2027. I'd like to give a little bit of information about the solicitation statistics. So this is showing the statistics from last year, just so folks understand, roughly what is selected. First column shows the statistics of the percentage of requests for full proposal that went out based on number of pre-proposals submitted. And that's typically roughly about 1/3 of pre-proposals submitted get asked to submit a full proposal. There is another down select then from full proposal to actual selection, varies. We're showing this by the BAA first, then the federal, and then all. So you can see roughly from about 26%, about 1/4 of the full proposals that are submitted are selected for funding. If you look at it from start to finish, from the pre-proposal to actually selection, that statistic, of course, drops to roughly 10%. Proposal selection criteria is laid out in the solicitation, but the very first one to look at is the relevance. This is a pass-fail criteria. And ultimately, does it address the objective of the SON? It's very important to read the SON carefully and ensure that your proposed topic is meeting the objective of the SON. And then we also look at the level of development. SERDP is to apply, is for basic and applied research or advanced technology development. So if what you're proposing is too mature, it may not be applicable for SERDP. And then the pre-proposal is evaluated based on the technical merit, personnel, and cost. Once you get to the full proposal evaluation, there will also be a section for the transition plan in terms of, once the technology is, or the project is completed, what would be the next steps? What is the path for this technology that's being proposed to make its way into into broader use, or ultimately perhaps mature into ESTCP? A competitive proposal, I'd say that we look at 4 things. One is that the proposal clearly addresses the statement of need. I can't emphasize this enough, that it must address the statement of need. We look that the proposer demonstrates a clear understanding of the state of the science so that you have the basis for the proposed idea. We are looking for hypothesis-driven work and tasks and to have those hypotheses clearly laid out. And we do expect the proposal to focus on the technical approach so that there's a very detailed technical approach with a clear experimental design. So what we're going to do now, we will move into the FY27 statements of need, and each program manager will present their statements of need. At the end of this, we're going to do a Q&A, which Laura already spoke about, that thank you, where you can submit your questions in the Q&A and then we will address them. I would just like to add one caveat before we go into this in terms of the Q&A. We can discuss in general about the solicitation. We can discuss if the statement of need is not clear to you and you have questions about exactly what is meant by the statement of need. What we cannot do is vet any idea that comes through. So if you're asking specifically questions of the program manager, like, is this a good idea? Does my idea meet the SON? We can't answer that during an open solicitation. And we will be directing you back to the statement of need to look at that carefully. So at this point, let me turn it over to Kevin Hires, who is the program manager for our resource conservation and resilience area, and he'll be walking through the RC statements of need. Kevin?
Great. Thank you, Andrea. Privileged to talk to you all today about the resource conservation and resilience statements of need. We have two that we've released for this year. Next slide, Laura. Both of these open statements of need, we're encouraging both full proposals and the limited scope proposals that Andrea just briefed on. The first statement of need is environmental heterogeneity and species population management under external stressors. This continues our investment in population responses to external and multiple stressors. Specifically this year, we hope to advance understanding of how demographic responses of species of concern to external stressors on DoD installations are influenced by the spatial and temporal heterogeneity of habitat. Specifically, the objectives we hope to accomplish through this solicitation is to identify the primary external stressors, interaction among those stressors that pose threats to sustainment of viable populations of species of concern on DoD lands and waters. And that includes both T&E species, threatened endangered species, and species of concern that we would like to prevent from becoming listed. Determining how spatial heterogeneity on installations and surrounding lands and waters can influence demographic responses to those species to external stressors is a priority for this solicitation. Identifying potential management solutions and opportunities to make use of spatial heterogeneity and or temporal variability to improve outcomes for species. And lastly, proposals should also address how temporal environmental variability interacts with spatial heterogeneity to create synergistic effects for species. Next slide. The second statement of need for resource conservation and resilience is continuing our investment on ecosystem transformation, specifically the impacts ecosystem transformation on testing and training lands. We hope to advance understanding of how recent and ongoing and potential ecosystem transformations may impact DoD mission fulfillment and operations directly or indirectly, and how management actions might offset such impacts. We are looking to document the pre-transformation ecosystem states, key ecosystem properties relevant to the DoD mission and operations on a particular installation, and identifying the primary drivers of transformation. Proposals should also determine the observed and expected post-transformation ecosystem states, together with observed or ongoing or expected changes in ecosystem properties following transformation. We'd also like proposals to assess the consequences of these changes for installation operations, natural infrastructure, ecosystem services, hazard environments, habitat for species of concerns, or other mission-related concerns. Lastly, the objective of this solicitation is to determine which, if any, of these consequences might be offset or mitigated by active management interventions in the emerging ecosystem, or by shifting mission attainment to other locations or installations. Next slide. So I'd like to now introduce my colleague, Dr. John LaScala, who is the Program Manager for the Weapons Systems and Platforms Program. John.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I'm going to be presenting on the Statement of Needs for Weapon Systems and Platforms. Next slide. This first statement of need is on chemical stripping of coatings and sealants on composites. Chemical stripping is more efficient and does not damage metal surfaces compared to mechanical stripping methods like plastic media blasting and sanding. But chemical strippers can be absorbed by composites, could swell them and damage them, which is why they're not used. So we're looking for that sweet spot that effectively removes the organic coating in the sealant, but does not damage the underlying composite. Additionally, we're looking for solutions that are safe for workers and should not be using restricted chemicals such as those through TSCA. We want also no HAPs and low VOC. So we realize ultimately this is a difficult ask, and we're effectively asking you to thread the needle, but we think it's still worthwhile and hoping that we can get some potential solutions to this area. To do that, we're asking you to hypothesize alternative chemical strippers, considering both thermodynamics and kinetics, and evaluate the efficacy of those solvents in removing the coatings or sealants relative to mechanical methods, and examining the effects on the underlying composite to ensure no damage or minimal damage. Next slide, please. So this next statement of need is on corrosion modeling and data validation for sustainable corrosion mitigation solutions. Basically, corrosion modeling is important to assess new designs, redesigns, and improve repairs to reduce maintenance. Corrosion modeling at galvanic couples is generally pretty good right now. The state of the art is pretty good there. But what we're really lacking is the ability to understand how corrosion inhibitors and primers protect and reduce corrosion rates in modeling. In fact, modelers tend to assume that the coatings have failed and effectively ignore the corrosion inhibition from the coatings in those modeling efforts. So to do this, we basically need you to identify specifically what gap you're going after within this corrosion modeling area, fundamentally explain your approach, and then we need you to validate your model compared to data. And ideally, you'd be using there's quite a bit of existing corrosion data. You might have your own existing corrosion data as well that you're welcome to utilize, and may need to develop new corrosion data as well to specifically evaluate things that you hadn't considered in previous work. And that would all be very reasonable for the proposal. You can also evaluate or validate your model through redesigns and examine how the redesign reduces corrosion, and both through models and experiments. So ultimately, the project should be a mixture of both modeling and at least experimental data and or measurement of some experimental data. And your models also, though, should be assessed as a function of the aggressivity of the corrosive environment. There's not just one corrosion environment that the DoD cares about. There's many different environments, and effectively the modeling should be working in many, if not all, of those environments. Next slide. Okay, this next statement of need is on safe size reduction of energetic materials for demilitarization. Here we want to develop a safe and scalable and durable process to reduce the size of energetic materials to enable treatment through closed destruction technology, or CDT. And the reason we want to do that is chemical and other processes are faster for smaller sized energetic materials, and the process is safer. So what we'd like you to do in the proposals is hypothesize and develop mechanical, chemical, thermal, or other methods to reduce the size of energetic materials to approximately 1 millimeter scale. The method needs to be safe. We do want you to identify the targeted munition, but just from the purpose of what is the size of the energetic here. It's not for you to actually use that munition, but just to understand that size scale. If we're talking about something that's several inches, many inches in size, or what have you, to then bring it down to this 1 millimeter scale. You can use surrogate non-energetics and energetic materials throughout the project. We would expect that that energetic materials will be used within the project. They do not, again, have to come from the munition itself. They can be surrogate energetics. And the end goal is really to identify how fast and effective your proposed method is in creating the desired size scale. We want also to understand all the waste streams from the process and they should be quantified. Next slide, please. So this next statement of need is on alternative nitration of energetic molecules. We want to develop innovative and scalable synthetic approaches of nitration to form the energetic molecules. And basically because the mixed acids that are typically used to create to nitro groups or nitramines and such on our energetic molecules, they cause problems with hazardous waste processing and contribute significantly to the cost of energetics production and create additional toxicity risk. We want this applied to existing DoD energetics. This is not for use for new novel energetics. Really needs to be things like the energetics listed on the slide, TNT, RDX, HMX, etc. We want you to hypothesize the methodology that will enable this more effective nitration that's also more efficient and reduces this acid waste. Explain why that would be all in the hypothesis. And we would expect the work would characterize the resulting energetics to ensure purity and morphology and evaluate their properties of those energetics to ensure equivalence. Again, we would like you to identify all byproducts and waste products from the process that's proposed. And because of that, the project should include a preliminary life cycle assessment to assess the economic and sustainability benefits of the method. Over. This last statement of need is on recovery of critical minerals from Department of War material. And basically, we are interested in developing more effective and efficient processes for recovering critical minerals. In particular, for this statement of need, we're focused on identifying processes to recover critical minerals from Department of War waste streams. So we're asking you to hypothesize how your proposed method will be more effective and efficient than current processes, if they even exist. And just to note, we're not going to give you Department of War waste. We're going to, you need to really identify what waste that comes out of our processes from our depots and what have you, and identify the critical minerals that are in them, their general concentrations, and then probably develop a surrogate waste that would be similar to that to use in your work to show whether your methodology is effective. The end goal of this project is to identify the purity and the yield that you can produce those critical minerals from these waste streams or surrogate waste streams, and then again do a preliminary life cycle analysis to assess the economic and sustainability benefits of this method. Next slide. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ramona Irie, who's the Program Manager for Environmental Restoration.
Okay, thanks, John, and hi, everyone. So now I'll go through the statement of need for the environmental program. Next slide. So this year we have just one statement of need that focuses on the fate and transport of chemicals released from tire wear particles. So we're specifically interested in proposals that develop physical and chemical properties of these organic pollutants and investigate how they move through urban runoff, soils, and also wastewater systems, eventually ending up in the aquatic environments and also in the sediments. In addition to their properties and fate and transport, we're also interested in proposals that evaluate natural attenuation of these pollutants. We're trying to understand how they degrade in the natural environment and how long they even persist in the natural environment. So we would like proposals to investigate the mechanisms by which these organic pollutants degrade. And lastly, we are also interested in proposals that develop environmental half-lives for 6-ppd and 6-ppd quinones. This is where we get a little bit more specific, and we're asking for half-lives for specific chemicals in water, soil, sediments, and also on road surfaces. So proposals don't have to address every topic area included in the statement of need, but as Andrea mentioned earlier, your proposal should thoroughly address how your idea meets the statement of need. So this is the one statement of need that we have this year. We look forward to receiving your proposals. So thanks, and I'll pass it back to Andrea.
Ramona, before we get into the Q&A, I would like to just give a little bit of information about our Applied Innovative Workshop, which is coming up the first week of March 2026 in Washington, D.C. If you are interested in our programs and haven't worked with us before, I encourage you to attend this workshop. Everyone we fund will be there presenting at least a poster. We have a number of facilitated workshops and innovation and application sessions to get more information about what's going on and to participate and brainstorm with the program office on future research strategies in a number of different areas. And also, finally, if you, again, are new to the program, we'll also be offering a short course on preparing proposals. What does the program area look for specifically, that will be led by myself as well as Clara Patton, who has also been working with our program office for many years and is very knowledgeable in this area. So at this point, I will turn it over to Laura Mack, who will go over the Q&A. I did want to mention, I believe there was one request to go back to a slide. We're not going to go back to a slide at this point, but do keep in mind that this whole session will be archived on our website, so you'll be able to access the recording later. Laura?
So we've received many questions from you all, and we'll get through as many as we can up until the end of the webinar at 2:30. And again, as a reminder, we're prioritizing questions that are broadly applicable to all submitters. So this first question is for Kevin. Two related questions that he's going to answer together. So for the RC Statement of Need testing and training lands, does this apply to marine environments? And then does the RC Statement of Need on species population management include offshore training ranges like AUTEC and PMRF?
The answer is yes. We've left room in both statements of need to include nearshore, DOD, lands and waters of interest. So we would consider proposals topical if they're addressing, those aquatic or nearshore environments.
All right. This next one is a question for Ramona. For the improved understanding of the fate and transport of compounds released from the tire wear particles to the aquatic environment statement of need, is it encouraged to propose research across multiple specific research objectives, or is it better to primarily focus on one?
So it's really not necessary to address multiple statement of needs. You can multiple objectives. You can address one or more than one. You can address one media. It's really up to you and the idea that you have. I would say that whatever budget you propose should match your scope of work and your level of effort. So just make sure those two match, but you can address just one objective, or if you're really motivated, you can address all of them, but ensure that the budget matches your level of effort. That's it.
All right, this question is for Andrea regarding the ER statement of need. Does SERDP have a workshop summary report that identifies research priorities for the environmental fate and transport of compounds released from tire wear particles?
We do not, and that is clearly someone who's familiar to how we normally operate. We have released such workshop reports in the past, but we have not conducted a workshop in this area yet.
All right, and then I'll go with another question for you, Andrea. Can we submit more than one pre-proposal idea as an institution?
Yes, we do not have a limit on the number of pre-proposals that are submitted either by institution or by investigator. When it gets down to the investigator in terms of how many pre-proposals one individual would submit, we don't monitor that, but it's really just your decision at that point. It is a workload issue, so that's up to you.
This next question is for Kevin. Are there specific DoD lands that are of greater interest to SERDP for the Research Conservation Program focus area? Is there a map indicating which regions are of interest?
That's a great question. We specifically in this SON give preference to what we call key DoD geographies. It's a focus that we've carried forward over the last several years that includes the Pacific Islands, Alaska, the arid Southwest, Great Basin, Southeast Coastal Plain, or other areas identified by the PI of concentrated DoD installations or assets. And so, it helps to focus projects in those areas that we do have high concentrations of DoD installations, but we do leave room for performers to make a case that they meet that DoD mission. There is no direct map. We have, if you visit our Innovation Landscapes Network, you'll see some examples of those key DoD geographies. But it's really just essentially, a tool to help you focus on what lands and waters are of greatest interest to us as a program.
Question is for John for the WP statements of need. How big are the parts that need chemical stripping?
Yeah, so for the purposes of the SERDP project, I would say that's not of particular relevance. You should be focused on coupons. They should be examining coupons of samples and how fast the coatings can be removed using the chemical strippers. So coupons on composites and examining it that way. This ultimately would be applied to things that could be, if it were to come to fruition, the technology would work. It could be applied in depots and such where they could be doing this on things as large as wing sections, but I really prefer you not focus on that size scale.
All right, and this is another question for you, John. Is the corrosion system focused on steel? What metals are of interest?
Yeah, so a number of metals are of interest, and that steel would certainly be included. Aluminum, most certainly, especially for aviation systems. Aluminum is one of our primary, really our primary alloy there. There are a variety of aluminums that we use, often typically 2000 series, 7000 series are the most common. But these are things that you can find in your research in the topic area. Really, any metal that's applicable to DoD weapon systems and platforms would be relevant to this, but steel and aluminum are really your most common. Over.
This is a question for Andrea. Is there a specific format for the pre-proposal? And if yes, where can we find it?
Yep, there definitely is a specific format. We have released the directions for the pre-proposal. If someone could drop that in the chat, perhaps that would be useful. I think it's probably, this is the SERDP website listed here, but we can give a more specific link that will take you to where you can get the information, but there is a defined format for it. So please do follow that.
This question is for Kevin. There is some overlap between the topic on environmental heterogeneity and species population management under external stressors and impacts of ecosystem transformation on testing and training lands. Could you please provide a little more guidance for applicants to determine how their proposal might best fit in one versus the other?
So, it's a good question. The ecosystem transformation statement of need is specifically focused on ecosystems and those management activities that may either stave off or direct that transformation to continue to meet a military mission requirement. So ecosystem scale, ecosystem focused. Some of the external stressors that are mentioned in the first statement of need on habitat, spatial and temporal heterogeneity and species response is looking at habitat and species scale interventions and dynamics. And so one could imagine that an ecological transformation may be one of those exogenous stressors, but that's the only explicit overlap that I see. Really, one is more species focused, using habitat heterogeneity and temporal variability in the parameters, ecosystem or environmental parameters that we list in the SON. The other is ecosystem focused and management activities that sustain the military mission activities that depend on that ecosystem structure or state.
All right, this next question is for John. Would SERDP be open to biological methods of stripping coatings and sealants or strictly chemical agents?
So Potentially, yes. The issue is whether this is a fast enough method. When I hear biological method to strip coatings and sealants, it sounds like something that could take very long. So if you have evidence or can provide theory as to why this should be as fast as chemical processes, then please go ahead. But yeah, it does need to be something that can be utilized in a depot operation that where these chemical stripping processes are done certainly within a workday, and often, many of them within a workday. Over.
This question is for Andrea about the open BAA. Is the open BAA that was issued in August different from the November BAA? I see that the open BAA has a rolling submission process. Is that correct? It would be helpful to clarify the type of BAA as part of the timeline.
There was an open BAA released in August. It is completely separate from this current solicitation, and we're really only focused on the current solicitation. We don't have any information to provide on the open BAA at this time.
And another question for Andrea. Can you clarify whether the main interest of SERDP is applied research, advanced technology development, or basic research?
Sure. We're interested in all of that. Our program is not limited to any one. When I brought that up, it was really intended to show that we can fund a range. Occasionally, when we release an SON, we may specifically state that we're only interested in advanced development. But for the most part, if that is not explicitly stated in the statement of need, you can interpret that to mean that we are interested in anything from basic research up to advanced development.
This question is for Kevin. Are natural experiments appropriate under the resource conservation statement of need?
They are often used as a method to address the objectives. As Andrea mentioned in the introductory slides, the projects to be topical must address the statement of need objectives. If natural experimentation is a method, technical approach that's effective at addressing those objectives, they're certainly welcome.
And this is another question for you, Kevin. Can proposed research target more than one species at the same installation?
Absolutely. Oftentimes, many species co-occur, whether you're in longleaf pine ecosystems of the southeast or, some of the desert ecosystems of there in southwest. So we do frequently get proposals that respond to multiple species in similar habitat.
This question is for John for the recovery of critical minerals topic. Is there a good reference for the catalog of batteries material that is not CAC restricted? For example, can we research a variety of basic specs for common batteries purchased in Department of War?
Yes, that latter part is definitely yes. I can't provide any more details than that.
This question is for Andrea. How many pre-proposals is an individual allowed to submit as a lead PI, co-PI, or collaborator?
Okay, this is similar to what we discussed previously. We don't have a limit. You can be a lead on multiple pre-proposals and as well as co-performers. So we do not have a limit on that.
This is another question for Andrea. What is the protocol for including military installation personnel in the pre and full proposal process?
Our protocol is that it's not required. There are many instances where it makes sense to have someone included. And in that case, they should be listed as a performer on your proposal. Just as they would any other proposal. I would say that in terms of funding mechanisms, if you're a private entity, we would send funding directly, if selected, we would send funding directly to the federal performer. That would not come to a private entity to then be distributed. So we would essentially be doing that from the program office in that sense. If there are any if there's any specific requirement for a DoD personnel to be involved, that would be listed in the statement of need.
This question is for John. Regarding the size reduction in munitions, should the casing or shell of the targeted munition be included in the assessment, or should the method focus solely on the energetic material it contains?
Yeah, I think the easier thing would be to just focus on the energetic material itself. Certainly, if you had an ability to focus on the casing as well, you're welcome to, but there are methodologies already known to remove energetic materials from casings. And so we're not expecting you to look into that. So focus on the energetic itself. Over.
This question is for Andrea. How long are typical projects?
So it varies. A limited scope proposal is expected to take roughly a year. The full proposal or a standard proposal typically run 3 to 4 years for those projects. It really depends on the idea that's proposed and what's the level of effort required.
This question is for Kevin. Are multi-regional projects welcome under resource conservation? If so, what requirements or special factors should proposers keep in mind?
So we do occasionally get multi-regional projects, and a couple of the factors that proposers should really keep front and center is: are they addressing the objectives outlined in the statement of need, and are you doing it with a focused intent? So if those, if you're simply adding regions because you could add regions, or are you adding them because they bring out some additional or complementary objectives? Having a very consistent, internally consistent, logical proposal is absolutely essential. If you run the risk occasionally of creating a sprawling project that has no connection to those objectives across regions. But we frequently do get successful multi-regional proposals that are really focused on that statement of need and the objectives that are contained therein.
And this is another question for you, Kevin. For the impacts of ecosystem transformation on testing land's statement of need, are there any primary drivers of transformation that have been previously identified that you are interested in?
Yeah, in the full statement of need that can be found online, you will see some examples that we provide. We do not limit or prescribe focus on any particular transformation. We're most interested in the creativity of the performers and the connection that they have mapped back to that military mission need and operations, and again the other specific objectives, particularly focused on managing transitions or transformations and some of those options therein. So I would just reference back to the examples, but we're not prescribing any specific drivers or of transformation in this particular slide.
This one's for Andrea. It's a few questions, so I can also repeat them if you need me to. So will there be an upcoming call for proposals focused on PFAS cleanup? Is there a timeline for ESTCP calls proposals and for SERDP proposals? How important is it to include an industry or defense partner to strengthen the chances of successful funding and demonstration?
Okay, so the first one was about PFAS. At this point this year, we are not releasing a statement of need on PFAS. What we've released to date is all we have for the FY27 SERDP call under environmental restoration. We will have an ESTCP request for proposals coming out in January. I hesitate to give an exact date, but generally the first half of the month, you can look for an ESTCP request for proposals. If you are not on our listserv, I would recommend that you get on our listserv, and perhaps someone from our end, if you could put in the link where they can go to get on the listserv, I think that would be very helpful. And then the last question, Laura, I did forget. I thought I would remember all of them, but I forgot.
For SERDP, how important is it to include an industry or defense partner to strengthen the chances of successful funding and demonstration?
Okay. So SERDP is, it's not a demonstration program. It's R&D. we really hesitate to give rigid guidelines about who you need to partner with. For us, it really comes down to the technical needs of the proposed idea. So if you need the support of another agency, someone in the military, then absolutely they should be on the proposal. If you're relatively new to this area and you're not familiar with the DoD and you will need to make those contacts, it is not really it's not a mark on your proposal if you don't have that that contact in the proposal. If that is required, we can ultimately provide a DoD liaison to you if that's required. But so it's really not, it's not a criteria for evaluation.
This question is for Kevin. Are there any resources that list or describe specific species of concern or disrupted ecosystems that are of interest to the DoD?
There are actually quite a few resources, and we'll try to provide some links in the chat as I list them out. Certainly, the mission party species are provided through our partners at the Office of Secretary of War, overseeing natural resource management. There are a number of resources at the DNICS website, including the Partners in Flight, and our what we affectionately call our rats and bats conservation groups. And so there are a number of different lists that you can find at these websites to give you a sense of where those high priority species are. When you think about species of potential concern that are not yet threatened or endangered, those are cases to be made, as to their potential impact on the DoD mission and managing for their those population dynamics, such that they are not listed is certainly a priority for us, and one that comes out in the statement of need.
This is a question for John. Are there any resources available to help identify possible critical minerals of interest for recovery?
Yeah, there's plenty of publicly available resources. I'm not going to get into the details on most of them. I would say the one that I highly recommend in terms of USGS puts out a critical minerals review every year. There's one out that came out a couple of months ago. I highly recommend looking into that for listing of key critical minerals, and I believe they do get into a little bit of what's relevant to DoD to a degree.
This question is for Kevin. The submitter works in collaboration with naval biologists at 2 islands off the coast of Southern California. Do I list them as part of a research team, include a letter of support? Essentially, I'm looking to demonstrate a solid partnership to instill confidence that we can complete the proposal.
So I'm going to answer this generally for all listeners. It's always wonderful to see in a proposal that you understand the department mission, and if you are proposing work at a particular installation, to have that installation support. At the pre-proposal stage, it is not necessary to have that letters of support, but certainly accounting for the installation involvement gives some some direct relevance towards understanding the mission requirement for the research proposed.
This question is for Andrea. Are typical budgets for SERDP and ESTCP proposals the same for a first proposal?
So by that, you're asking, I'm interpreting the question that you mean you haven't, as an investigator who's proposing, you haven't received funding from our program before, and therefore should the budget on your proposal look different from someone who's perhaps received funding from us in the past? No, we don't have any sort of decision in that way that again, you should propose the level of effort, cost that's required to accomplish the objectives that are in your proposal. If there's a concept that is, higher risk, less supporting data, more of a proof of concept, I would recommend going with a limited scope for that sort of proposal. But we don't judge it based on, first time or several times.
This question is for Kevin, and I think it's been asked a couple different ways here. Should specific testing and training lands where we would undertake this work already be identified at the pre-proposal stage, or could the specific sites be identified later on?
So it depends on the proposal. As you depending on the SON, we've left room for a focus on installation and the surrounding areas. And so if work is essential to be performed on an installation, it's going to be important to have some of those contacts and approvals early in the process. But depending on the mechanisms that you're choosing or the approach you're going to take to accomplish the objectives, if there's not if it's not specific to an installation or doesn't require a great deal of installation host involvement, there may be you may have some flexibility to select those sites after pre-proposal stage. So there's really is it depends on your approach that you're proposing and the degree to which you're going to need to be integrated in beside the installation boundary.
Question is for John. For corrosion modeling, does the complex assemblies term used in the proposal call mean metal substrate with primers, inhibitors, and organic or metallic coatings?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a particular DoD assembly that we've been utilizing to assess our coatings and corrosion mitigation solutions, and it basically involves a number of metals that are fastened, that have a number of fasteners that are different than the substrates, and we look at the corrosion of that mixed metal assembly. If you contact me through the contact information provided, I can provide you details on that assembly.
Okay, this question is for Kevin. Is there a relationship between Sentinel Landscapes and the Innovation Landscape Network?
Absolutely, there is. And we'll put links to both of those programs in the chat for folks to download and read about. The Sentinel Landscape Program was established under our Readiness Environmental Protection Initiative to create compatible use buffering and land uses around installation. So you can think of it as our partners program for conservation outside the fence line. The Innovation Landscape is a program, the network that we've created out of our ESTCP resource conservation program area is focused on providing a much more directed end user engagement to help accomplish effective tech transfer and scaling. So trying to address that last mile, the last mile or valley of death problem. We try to, wherever possible, ensure direct overlap of our innovation landscapes on top of our Sentinel landscapes, so that one of the transfer pathways for successfully performed projects is through our partners program to help scale and accomplish those conservation objectives outside the fence line as well.
Laura?
Yep.
Sorry, we have about 2 minutes left, and I see 2 questions that relate to the workshop. So unless you see something else, I think I will close with those 2 questions.
Sounds good.
Okay, and then, so we had a question that I would like to address, because the question was that they understand that due to the volume of proposals, we don't provide feedback on all the pre-proposals that are rejected, and it is simply a workload issue that we're not able to do that. But the question is then, what is our recommendation for proposers who get rejected at the pre-proposal stage, and how can they improve if they don't know what the issues were? And that's fair. It is difficult to improve if you don't know what the issues were. I would highly encourage you to come to our workshop. And that's because there is the opportunity to talk directly to myself, our other program managers, and we do offer resources there, such as, we do offer a short course on preparing proposals and submitting them to our solicitation. So, that I think is the best way to really understand the program and understand the sorts of things we're looking at. And then we've had a number of questions about the Applied Innovation Workshop itself. As those of you know who've asked the question. We were originally scheduled to have our workshop at the beginning of this current month, and we did postpone, and we will now be the first week in March. And the agenda will be quite similar to what we were going to have this month. We just are adjusting it a little bit due to space limitations, but we expect that to be out very, very soon. Hopefully, we plan to have it out before everyone breaks for holidays. So you should see that soon. And there is a registration fee for the workshop in March, and that will all be available when we update the registration page, which will come out soon. And let me close as well with, if you're not on our listserv, please get on our listserv, because we will announce it there in terms of when that workshop is available. So, Laura, would you like to formally close us out?
Just a few reminders. First, if you submitted a question and we didn't have time to get to it today and it concerns a specific statement of need, feel free to reach out to the appropriate program manager to ask that. And then another reminder that the slides are available on the website right now, which was shared in the chat, and we will also be uploading